Vladislav Alexander Stefan, My Passion, 2018. My Passion. A documentary on the Alexander Stefan. Physics, Art, Society. This biopic is based on the books and other various works in physics research, arts, and higher education by Vladislav Alexander, Sasha, Stefan. Books for general public. The False Death Trilogy. The books of the Alexander Stefan on Albert Einstein. Technical books for specialists and general public by the Alexander Stefan. The Alexander Stefan, editor, author. The Alexander Stefan, founder, editor-in-chief of the book series. The Alexander Stefan, translator from Serbian into English. Books about the Alexander Stefan. This is La Jolla Cove in La Jolla, California, USA. One of Stefan's favorite walking places. Stefan will be walking here and telling you the story about his passion. Physics, arts, and the Stefan University. He will tell you also about some remarkable individuals worldwide he has had the honor to encounter. And he will tell you about some places worldwide he has visited which got close to his heart. Passion, says Stefan, needs obstacles to augment her strength. As the story is about Stefan's works in various walks of life, you may think of him as the man of grandeur. On the contrary, Stefan is quite a modest man, who never makes small plans, always inaugurate great projects, and is convinced that the best life is lived in humility, hope, and patience. The content of this movie is given so as to provide the viewer with an easy access to particular sections of the movie that a viewer may find a special interest in.
Have you ever wanted to know how to say My La Jolla in Serb language, Serbian Serb, Montenegrin Serb, Bosnian Serb, American Serb, Australian Serb language, etc.? Well, here it is in Serb language. Moja La Jolla. Moja La Jolla. In Russian language you would say Moja La Jolla. Moja La Jolla. In what follows, I'll be doing some walking at La Jolla Cove and talking to you about my passion in a few words or more. And I play on my guitar and sing for you. Let me introduce myself. I am Vladislav Alexander Stefan, a theoretical physicist by training, who, in addition to physics, likes to do many other things with the same passion. I am 70 years old, and I love it. Guided by the voices from beyond, with a burning candle in my hand, I go forward to the place. I intuit it's not the end. Creativity, the queen of passion, for the reason of her own, is pushing me forward toward the goal, which to me is unknown. Creativity, my bride, keeps my heart on fire, with the bliss and pain, side by side, cursing me by our marriage, never to be satisfied. My passion alone is my driving force. We never part. All my activities are within her heart. She's all I have in my life's creative endeavor. She's my mistress, my joy and sorrow, my life's flavor. My passion is fierce and true, very much so. Why? Ask me not, I do not know. Johnny Cash, not only you, man, I've been everywhere too. When I look at this list and the places I've been to, thanks to my being a theoretical physicist, and places I have visited privately, I can say that I am a true walker. Johnny Walker Scotch whiskey comes to mind. Or I can say that I am a traveling man. Ricky Nelson's song, I am a traveling man, comes to mind. I'm a traveling man. Or I can say that I am a time traveler, if you will. Dr. Weisskopf comes to mind. Johnny Cash used to sing, I've been everywhere, man. I would say, Johnny, you've been everywhere, man. But not only you, I've been everywhere too. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Johnny Cash, not only you, man. I've been everywhere too. Yes, I've been to Alaska. North to Alaska, where the gold rush was on. North to Alaska, oh, gold rush is on. I make no small plans. The man is what he chooses to be. A man achieves the heights by standing upon the shoulders of men. Sir Isaac Newton says, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. I have been always driven to inaugurate great plans, which will benefit my fellow men. This is balanced by my love for simpler and smaller things in life, such as walking, alone or in the company of good friends, for example. This is a spot in La Jolla, San Diego, where I walk, think, and talk to myself. The midnight hour is the best time to be here. I have 2 more walking spots, one in Las Vegas and the other one on Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. This one in La Jolla is probably my favorite one. I'll tell you a few words or more about my passion right from this place in broad daylight. I speak several European languages and read Latin and Greek. Every particular language that you speak or read brings you a new particular mindset. It is the time travel, so to speak, on the time strings of different cultures, traditions and civilizations. Your intellect, emotion and intuition are enormously enriched. Quite often, when you speak a particular language, you cannot retrieve a proper word from the memory storage, but it pops out from another language storage. You have an accent in speaking any of those languages. You have an accent even when you speak your native language.
My passion. 137. The Crossroad of Classical, Relativity, and Quantum Physics. Number. The measure of all that there is. Mathematical physics. Mathematical medicine. The nature of time.
The False Death Trilogy. America, Here I Come. Commencing My Life in America. December 18th, 1981.
I arrived at JF Kennedy Airport, New York, on December 18, 1981.
Says Stefan, December 18th, 1981 was a Friday, and it was the 352nd day of the year 1981. The 2026 calendar will be exactly the same as the 1981 calendar, excluding the dates for Easter and other irregular holidays that are based on a lunisolar calendar. I look forward to relive, so to speak, one of the most important years of my living years, 1981. Can I think it my time travel extraordinaire?
I stayed in the New York Statler Hotel for 2 weeks. Thereupon I took a train to Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, where, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I carried out the research in the tokamak thermonuclear fusion physics. The New York Statler Hotel is near the Empire State Building, so I went to the Empire State Building, looked up and said, "America, here I come." I took long walks in the streets of New York. I like to walk and think. Thinking and walking is a good combination of mental movements and physical movements. I think much better when I move. At one occasion I got into a dark street. A police car showed up. A she policeman asked me, "Sir, what are you doing here?" "I'm just walking," I answered. "Sir, this is not a good place to be walking," said the she policeman. It felt good to be protected by the NYPD. At that moment, America appeared to me as the big family, caring and loving.
Washed, or unwashed, New York City is the greatest city in the world.
Washed or unwashed, New York City is the greatest city in the world.
Happy New Year, 1982.
For the New Year's Eve, 1981-1982, I was in my room in the Statler Hotel with my she friend I had met at Macy's. She helped me buy leather boots. We were participating in comfort to the ball drop on Times Square as we were watching the Dick Clark Show, New Year's Rockin' Eve.
A Happy New Year to you in 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
Dick Clark used to be the oldest teenager in the world. Now, that's this a 70 years old man. Oh, manly man. As I was walking the streets of New York in those leather cowboy boots, I felt like a rhinestone cowboy.
Like a rhinestone cowboy.
From New York to Boston, Albert Einstein College of Medicine.
On my way from New York to Boston, the train was passing by Albert Einstein College of Medicine. I thought it a good omen for my life in America.
The Stefan Salute to America.
Hey, hey, America, what do you mean to you? Hey, hey, America, what do you mean to you? America, so love to you. Red, white, and blue. America, so love to you. Red, white, and blue.
Every American asks, "Hey America, what do I mean to you?" We love America, and we want her to love us back. The Stefan University, the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, established on November 3, 1989. The anthem of the Stefan University.
More to sing the song of life that makes you fly with a bird-like wing. See your dream all coming true now in your joy of learning. The love and joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Physics will give the answer to the mystery of human life. Faith is tranquilized in our hearts, giving the hope to the human strive. Love and joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Mortals feel your eternal being, up to the moment of your flight. Mortals dream your life and living, never lose your dream divine. Love and joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Wisdom to the world we bring now, wisdom from the world is light. The light of knowledge shines upon us, mortals join the friends of time.
The Stefan University. We are the friends of time. The Stefan University Tower. Wisdom to the world, from the friends of time. Hail, the celestial age of Aquarius. 2000 to 4000 after Christ. Hey America. What do I mean to you? Music and lyrics by the Alexander Stefan.
Hey, hey, America, what do I mean to you? Hey, hey, America, what do I mean to you? I'm the one who builds you, adores you and keeps you strong, as others are doing too. Hey, hey, America, what do we mean to you? Hey, hey, America, what do we mean to you? America, we adore your hair, blown by the winds from the heartland. America, we adore your eyes so big and bright, and your figure that catches our sight. America, keep bringing your light to the world and freedom too. Hey, hey, America, what do we mean to you? Hey, hey, America, what do we mean to you? Even when I'm pale, when my blood is full, I'll still be loving you. Hey, hey, America, what do I mean to you? Hey, hey, America, what do I mean to you? Hey, hey, America, hey, hey, America, hey, hey, America, what do I mean to you? America, soul up to you, red, white, and blue.
I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God.
Einstein had retained his Swiss citizenship until his last breath. He had a double citizenship, American and Swiss citizenship, a double nationality, American and Swiss passports. Stefan has chosen a single citizenship, the citizenship of the USA. That will remain the case until Stefan's flatline day. The Stefan Hourglass 2001. Immortal human being. Homo sapiens sapiens scientific, thinking, and technological, applied thinking, human being. Temporal worlds. 22 worlds in 11D time, and 11D space. Sapientia, amor. Potentia. Wisdom. Love. Power. On February 11, 2001, by the grace of Qual the Giver, the Supreme Being, Dr. Victor Falstaff becomes the Master Guardian of the creation. The 22 sibling universes. The 22 worlds placed on the matrix. The sphere of 11 time dimensions, and 11 space dimensions. 1. Oneness. 2. Two-ness. Duality. 137. 11. 1. Out of many, one. The motto of the USA. 13. Sapientia, wisdom. 3. Amor, love. 37. Potentia, power. 137. The numeric value of KBLH, Kabbalah. The meaning of 137, in physics. 137. The magic number of physics. 137. The rendezvous number of classical, relativity, and quantum physics. While the Giver, the Supreme Being. While the Giver, the Supreme Being. It's a shame, says Stefan, that only the born Americans can run for the President of the United States of America. The born-to-be Americans, as I like to refer to naturalized citizens of the USA, can make great presidents, too. If I were President of the United States of America, I would focus, among other things, on these two aspects. To keep America the strongest and the most generous country in the world. Let's keep America the strongest and the most generous in the world. Marlon Brando on American Dream. In the 1950s, says Stefan, America was living her American dream. Say, every home owns one or more cars, but the rest of the world could only afford to dream about American dream. Now, more and more people worldwide can afford to live the American dream, and the trend is expanding. And the role of America in this process is of the ultimate importance. In the movie, The Formula, 1980, Marlon Brando, oil executive using the words of Thomas Jefferson, out of the context, says, "Money, not morality, is the principle of commerce in civilized nation. That's the philosophy that builds this nation. Without it, there ain't no America." Now, watch the genius actor saying that.
Money, not morality, is the principal commerce of civilized nations. Thomas Jefferson, 200 years ago. That is the philosophy that built this nation.
I resent that. The money with no morality evaporates swiftly. The American nation is built on the principle of morality, the code of law, the most liberating in the world. Liberty involves responsibility, morality.
You know about this nation. Didn't you ever give a second thought to American citizens? You're the reason their money's worthless. You're the reason old people are eating out of garbage cans, and kids get killed in bullshit wars. You're not in the oil business, you're in the oil shortage business. You're an ivory tower hoodlum, a common street killer. I wish to Christ there was some way I could nail you.
Well, going to be nailing the American dream, Barney.
In the 1970s, says Stefan, I was roaming around Europe in my BMW 2002. That was a very sexy car then. It was the decade of the oil shortage crisis. Quite often I would hear from the people the opinion about the United States that resonated with the words of George C. Scott. People would say that America is a selfish country, exploiting other countries in the world, and, in that way, accumulating the wealth. I had resented it then, and I resent it now, in 2018. No other country in the world is more generous than the USA. America is going to be my future homeland. As a 12-year-old kid, I encountered, in 1960, famous American actor Alan Ladd in Titograd, Podgorica, Montenegro, Yugoslavia. That event made me aware that America was going to be my future homeland. The unity of the world via out of many, one. The motto of the United States of America. How do you create one out of many? On the level of one nation, that has been achieved quite successfully in the USA. Can that be applied on a global scale? That's not easy to answer. Throughout history, every conquest tended to create one out of many. Roman Empire operated on that principle under the banner of the glory of Rome. Currently, there is the banner of the open world, globalization, as the liberation through global collaboration of nations. It could be also the insidious plan of a warless subjugation, and the loss of national identities. In this case, the world is open to a great power, be it financial, military, scientific, and similar, transcending the national interests, to easily, in an insidious way, subjugate the rest of the open world. In that kind of open world, the creation of one out of many will never work, and it will end up into a global war. That's not the open world I addressed in my The Open World Manifesto, 2009. The honor and heroism principle for the unity of the world. The principle of honor and heroism was formulated by Marko Miljanov Popovich. Honor, protect others from yourself. Heroism, protect self from others. This applies to a person, organizations, nations, races, etc. Honor is the principle of the respect for otherness. Heroism is the principle of safeguarding the selfness. My grandfather Stefan Radosavov Popovich, says Stefan, crosses the bloodline with Marko Miljanov Popovich. Unity of the world through diversity. Respect for the otherness. American Embassy in Moscow, Russia. Soviet Union, 1979. Americans and Russians are natural friends. From 1977 to 1981, says Stefan, I was doing research in Moscow, coming from Belgrade, Serbia, Yugoslavia, in the thermonuclear fusion physics at the Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Soviet, now Russian, Academy of Sciences. In 1979, I got acquainted with many Americans in the American Embassy in Moscow.
In the American Embassy, Moscow, I had an acquaintance, Richard Larkin, a U.S. Major General. Sometimes, when I would call his suite in the embassy, he would pick up the phone. I would hear his voice, "Yellow." His hello sounded to me as yellow. Yellow is a bright color. The great Goethe says that color yellow is the brightest color of them all. Major General was from Colorado Springs, Colorado, so I told him about Nikola Tesla, an American Serb inventor, physicist, and his laboratory in Colorado Springs. Major General knew more about Nikola Tesla than I did.
On Fridays night, says Stefan, the Marine Club in Moscow, the United States Embassy, was open to general public, and was the hot spot for the international youth. It was a Friday night fever.
Friday night fever. Friday night fever.
Major General Richard Larkin, says Stefan, the defense attaché to the United States ambassador in Moscow, my acquaintance, was successfully promoting friendship among the international youth in Moscow. I made many international friends there.
That Friday night fever. That Friday night fever.
Malcolm Toon was the American ambassador to Soviet Union at that time, 1979. He was the ambassador to Yugoslavia from 1971 to 1975. Mr. Toon was an expert in the Slavic culture, and in the subject, referred to as the Slavic soul. I am convinced, says Einstein, that even if the United States and Russia were both capitalist countries, or communist, or monarchist, their rivalries, conflicting interests, and jealousies would result in strains similar to those existing between the two countries today. I would say there will always be a friendly rivalry between the USA and Russia. The Americans and the Russians are natural friends. I learned this during my research years, 1977 to 1981, in Moscow, at the P.N. Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Soviet, now Russian, Academy of Sciences, at the department led by Viktor Pavlovich Selim. I was a guest of the Soviet, now Russian, Academy of Sciences, coming from Belgrade, Serbia, Yugoslavia. I had also research visits to the Physics Research Centers in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, Kiev, Ukraine, Tbilisi, Georgia, and Novosibirsk. All my expenses were paid by the Russian Academy of Sciences, for which I am deeply thankful. This was in the spring 1979. I was on a research visit in Novosibirsk, Siberia. I took a cab in Akademgorodok. As a foreigner, it was a custom to chat with a taxi driver in the Soviet Union. They were quite educated people about world issues. I had that experience in Moscow, Leningrad, St. Petersburg, Kiev, Tbilisi, and in Akademgorodok. The taxi driver told me he had had a party at his place a few days before. His brother from Vladivostok brought some California wine. Such a good thing, he said to me about the California wine. His brother was on a business trip in California. The cab driver loved the Americans and hoped to visit California one day. He said that his brother had told him that the Russians and Americans are very much alike. Defense physics and technology. Protecting self from others. Laser waveguide. Laser waveguide. Electronic countermeasures at high altitudes. Electronic countermeasures at high altitudes. Satellite data storage at high altitudes. Satellite data storage at high altitudes. Secure communications at high altitudes. Secure communications at high altitudes. Physics and technology of the living matter. Neurophysics, stem cell physics, genomic physics, and similar disciplines. Here is what the Alexander Stefan, the author, says about neurophysics, stem cell physics, genomic physics, and public health.
Genomics and genomic medical physics have advanced rapidly over the last decade. The research field is shifting from testing rare genetic disorders to the diagnosis of diseases, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, osteoporosis, cancer, and others. The medical physics is now in a position to prevent a disease from occurring, in other words, to treat the cause rather than the symptoms, as it has been mostly the case up to the present days. A significant role, it seems to me, is played by the involvement of theoretical physics in medical research. It is the revolutionary onset for medical science, the paradigm shift in medicine and public health. The development of genomic medical physics is empowered by the information acquired from the United States Human Genome Project. It is possible to design the treatments and drugs to each individual patient. The risk of getting a disease, or even infections, is almost always in part due to the combination of genes a human was born with. By using the genetic information, medical doctors predict with different degrees of certainty what diseases their patients are at risk of developing. Consequently, medical doctors use this information to reduce the chance of the disease from occurring or to prevent it completely. The explorations into the nature of human genome, one of the major scientific challenges of the 21st century, sheds light on how faulty genes play a role in the cause of a disease. Commercial efforts are shifting away from diagnostics and toward developing a new generation of therapeutics based on genes. The drug designs, pharmacogenomics, are being revolutionized. Researchers worldwide are now creating new classes of drugs based on the information on gene sequence and protein structure function, rather than the traditional trial and error method. Drugs that are laser-guided to specific sites in the body and the brain promise to have fewer side effects than many of the drugs used currently. The ultra-short laser-guided drug delivery techniques have a high potential in targeting drugs to specific molecular areas in the brain.
The American Society for Genomic Medicine, Stefan University. The American Society for Laser Neuroscience, Stefan University. Toward a healthier human race. Unity of the world via the augmentation of brain-mind capabilities. Through the research, says Stefan, in neurophysics, stem cell physics, genomic physics, and similar disciplines, it may be possible to augment our brain-mind capabilities and become healthier human beings, almost godlike. I fantasized about this in my fiction fantasy, the Falstaff trilogy. Every American asks, "Hey America, what do I mean to you?" We love America. And we want her to love us back. When you are successful in America, you are successful worldwide. America is the country of opportunity like no other country in the world. The USA is the country of opportunity where people worldwide want to come to, more than to any other country, and establish their new life. It is fair to say that the world loves America and America loves the world. It is fair to say that the world loves America and that America loves the world. The Alexander Stefan works in higher education.
The idea of establishing an institution of higher education, a university, has been intuitively within me since my youth years. I have been always driven first by intuition, then comes analysis and other rational brain activities. When I arrived in San Diego in 1983, my intuition told me that this was the place to turn my idea into reality. Soon things started to unfold. I met many creative individuals who founded successful technological and financial companies, and I got acquainted with Roger Revelle, founding member of the University of California, San Diego. So my idea on establishing a university came out from the intuition battle into a real world. It was just a question how to proceed. I knew intuitively that time itself, or she time, as I like to say, will show me the right ways. In November 1989, after 8 years spent in America, I arrived in New York in December 1981. I established, with the help and endorsement of many important people, the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University. The university had started with physics. I was 41 years old then. Since 1989, all I have been doing is developing the Stefan University. It takes time to build a world-class university. Anything less than a world-class is of no interest to me.
The 5 pillars of the Stefan University. The message to the leaders of the Stefan University.
To the leaders of the Stefan University, I can tell with confidence and with an open heart, you can build as many as you want, big buildings worldwide, to show the strength of your university. But the true strength of your university is in the bone marrow of its 5 pillars, invisible and unchangeable. The true strength of any entity is never easily visible. It is embedded in the entity's pillars. The leaves come and go, but the trunk of your university's tree of wisdom stays stable and unchanged.
The anthem of the Stefan University. Wisdom to the world, from the Friends of Time.
More to sing the song of light that makes you fly with a bird-like wing. See your dream all coming true now in your joy of learning. 11 joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Physics will give the answer to the mystery of human life. Faith is tranquilizing our hearts, giving the hope to the human strife. 11 joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Mortals feel your eternal being, up to the moment of your flag line. Mortals dream your life and living, never lose your dream divine. 11 joys of living in life, bringing the force to your daily strife. Wisdom to the world we bring now, wisdom from the world design. The light of knowledge shines upon us, mortals from the threads of time.
Throughout my life, says Stefan, up to this very day, I've been happy to associate, in various capacity, with remarkable people of physics, arts, and of the political power in many a country worldwide, and in America, in particular. They all have helped me, royally, in the building of my projects. For that, I thank them all, royally. It is not possible for me to salute them all, explicitly, at this place, and I express my deep regret on that account. In the following, says Stefan, I will tell you about some of the individuals I have been associating with. On his photograph, Mr. Ladd wrote, to Sasha, "You speak well, Alan Ladd." The encounter with Alan Ladd, says Stefan, was my major inspiration about my future life in America. I encountered Alan Ladd, a famous American movie actor, in 1960, as a 12-year-old kid, in Titograd, now Podgorica, Montenegro, Yugoslavia. I jumped into his Hotel Montenegro suite, so to speak, and asked him for his photograph with his signature. The encounter lasted not more than 15 minutes. Mr. Ladd said to me, "I have a son your age." I told Mr. Ladd that I would like to be a movie director one day. "That's much better than to be an actor like me," he said to me. Now I am a 70-year-old man, but the strength of that encounter has never faded away. Whenever I think of that event, it's like the time travel into that time domain. When I come back to our time domain, I feel replenished and rejuvenated, almost like a kid, again. I am completely optimistic about fusion and laser fusion, said Robert Hofstadter, in Moscow, 1978. I met Hofstadter, says Stefan, in Moscow, Russia. In the late 1978, during the conference on the laser-driven controlled thermonuclear fusion. Akademician Basov, director of the Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Soviet Russian Academy of Sciences, introduced me to Hofstadter. We had a long conversation in the cafeteria of the Lebedev Institute. I told him that I was planning to move to the States. At that time, I was in Moscow, doing research in theoretical plasma physics, in the Department of Plasma Theory of the Lebedev Institute, led by Viktor Pavlovich Selin. Robert Hofstadter and Keith Brockner, says Stefan, had worked for KMS Fusion, a private company for the research in laser fusion located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. At that time, I could have not known that in the mid-1983, I would be working with Keith Brockner on the inertial confinement fusion at the University of California in La Jolla, UCSD. I never got to meet with Hofstadter in the States, says Stefan, but I had a few telephone conversations with him at the time, when I was working on the establishment of the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University, in La Jolla, California. He was at Stanford University at that time. I remember in one telephone conversation he said, "Keith knows all physics." I was happy to hear it, because I worked with Keith, and I was acquainted with his mighty research skills. Hofstadter, says Stefan, was a scientific advisor for the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University. After I had received from Hofstadter his biography, I found out that we had been celebrating the same birthday, February 5th. Hofstadter was born on February 5th, 1915. I was born on February 5th, 1948. Marshall Rosenbluth was also celebrating the same birthday, February 5th. Marshall was born on February 5th, 1927. American Embassy, Moscow, 1979. From 1977 to 1981, says Stefan, I was doing research in Moscow, coming from Belgrade, Serbia, Yugoslavia, in the thermonuclear fusion physics at the Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Soviet, now Russian, Academy of Sciences. In 1979, I got acquainted with many Americans in the American Embassy in Moscow.
In the American Embassy, Moscow, I had an acquaintance, Richard Larkin, a U.S. Major General. Sometimes, when I would call his suite in the embassy, he would pick up the phone. I would hear his voice, "Yellow." His hello sounded to me as yellow. Yellow is a bright color. The great Goethe says that color yellow is the brightest color of them all. Major General was from Colorado Springs, Colorado, so I told him about Nikola Tesla, an American Serb inventor physicist, and his laboratory in Colorado Springs. Major General knew more about Nikola Tesla than I did.
Malcolm Toon was the American ambassador to Soviet Union at that time, 1979. He was the ambassador to Yugoslavia from 1971 to 1975. Mr. Toon was an expert in the Slavic culture, and in this subject, referred to as the Slavic soul. At one of the reception parties, says Stefan, organized by Major General Lorkin, at the American Embassy in Moscow, 1979, Mr. Toon had told me about his close contact with Marshal Tito, the President of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. I met, says Stefan, Abraham Ayres in Brussels, Belgium, in July 1980, during the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, Conference on Controlled Thermonuclear Fusion. The MIT Plasma Fusion Center and the Bears Group were among the finest plasma research centers in the world. My office at the MIT was nice, with many computers around, and windows overlooking the MIT buildings. Those were the times when the computers in every corner was not a commonplace at universities. Only the wealthiest universities, such as the MIT, could have afforded it. I have always thought of Abraham Ayres as the Arnold Sommerfeld of the American plasma physics. A number of brilliant American plasma physicists of my generation were trained in the Bears School. Vicky Weisskopf of the MIT, when he was my guest in La Jolla in 1992, also emphasized the great importance of the Sommerfeld School for the development of quantum mechanics. Werner Heisenberg and Wolfgang Pauli were Sommerfeld's graduate students, among others. Quantum theory had many conceptual difficulties, but Sommerfeld used to encourage his students to focus on formal calculations, hoping that in time the conceptual difficulties would go away. Nothing of that sort has ever happened. The Einstein-Bohr controversy in quantum mechanics had ensued, and it is a hot topic even today. The Bohr school was deeply, the late 1970s, involved with the radio frequency current drive and Daka-Max, in the lower hybrid frequency range. I concentrated my research on electron-cyclotron frequency range, which was a thoroughly new research area. Our research, Bohr's and Stefan, on electron-cyclotron barometric Daka-Max plasma absorption and current drive was among the first, if not the first, in the world. For the anomalous Daka-Max plasma absorption and current drive in the electron-cyclotron frequency range, ECFR, however, you needed powerful gyrotrons that were not available at that time. Recently, 2016, the Bohr's monumental work in plasma physics and technology, entitled Plasma Physics and Fusion Plasma Electrodynamics, has been published by the Oxford University Press, USA. I met Keith at the University of California, San Diego, in 1982. He was extremely physically fit. He looked like an athlete graduate student. His secretary, Peggy, told me of his passion for the rock climbing. Instantly, in my mind, I saw myself climbing the rocks of Southern California with him. My intuition has rarely failed me, and it did not fail me that time. A few months thereupon, I was climbing with Keith. I had the great joy to climb any rock, but only once. Keith, however, enjoyed repeating the climbs with evergreen vigor and passion. All I could do, it was just to share his joy, and drop my jaw and all. Keith was editor-in-chief for the book, Inertial Confinement Fusion, in Stefan's book series, Research Trends in Physics, published by the American Institute of Physics Press. Recently, 2016, a book by Keith, entitled Mountaineering, A Personal History, has been published. This narrative is released posthumously by Bonnie, Keith's third wife. I congratulate her. The Alexander Stefan. University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. 1982. The Alexander Stefan, lecturing on nonlinear beat-wave parametric plasma theory. At the UCLA, 1982, says Stefan, I found the environment with many young researchers. It was fun to be there. You do feel the spirit of Southern California at the UCLA. Burton Freed and John Dawson were the leaders of the plasma physics group at the UCLA, interchanging their official roles every year. In the late 1960s, John Dawson was a guest of the Lebedev Institute of Physics, Soviet Academy of Sciences, in the Department for Plasma Theory, led by Viktor Pavlovich Selim, where I was doing research from 1977 until 1981. Those were the times when the parametric plasma phenomena theory was in the initial phase of development. The Selim School was one of the most active in the world in that area. John and I were sort of the Russian cousins, so to speak. I discussed in depth with John the beat wave plasma physics, at that time a hot plasma topic. At the Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Russian Academy of Sciences, I was doing research in the Department of Plasma Phenomena Theory, led by famous Russian mathematical physicist Viktor Pavlovich Selim. Viktor Pavlovich was my guest in La Jolla, California, in 1992, doing research at the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University. Viktor Pavlovich Selim was my doctoral thesis advisor. I discussed with Burton Fried, says Stefan, the theory of parametric plasma instabilities in a non-monochromatic driver pump. I had met Burton Fried earlier, at Como on Lake Como, Italy, in 1980, during the European Conference on Tokamak Fusion. Thomas Stix from the Princeton University introduced us. At the UCLA, says Stefan, I developed the theory of parametric plasma instabilities in a non-monochromatic driver pump. I focused on the double parametric resonance in ionosphere, using radio frequency beat waves. I published, in 2 parts, the unified parametric plasma theory with non-monochromatic driver pump, in the Physics of Fluids, July 1983. Murray's intelligence is enormous, says Stefan. Nikolai Nikolaevich Gogolyov from Russia told me, 1978, of Gauss-Man, as being closest to Einstein, in intellectual capacity. To me, he appeared as being not of this world, as a man from the beyond. I met Murray Gauss-Man at the San Diego airport in January 1991. He was an invited speaker for the conference, honoring Keith Bruckner for his lifetime achievement. I took him in my car from the airport to La Valencia Hotel in La Jolla. I did not know, he said to me, that young physicists could afford Porsche, especially red one. We shared a laugh. I told him about my recent encounter with Russian physicist Arkady Migdal. Swiftly, Murray started to tell me about the roots of the word Migdal. I was fascinated. I started, says Stefan, my collaboration with Nicholas A. Kroll, a famous American plasma physicist, in 1983, in La Jolla, California. We worked together in 2 companies, J-Core, Inc., San Diego, California, and Kroll Associates, Inc., San Diego, California. In my graduate student days I would study plasma physics from the Kroll Trivial Piece textbook. Now, I use it as the plasma physics reference book. The book was translated into Russian. Many of my Russian colleagues would have it in the bookshelves in their offices. The late 1970s, when I was doing research in Moscow, Russia. Nick is a fast thinker and a fast decision maker. It had been the ultimate joy to do physics with him. Washington, D.C., Spring 1983. The Alexander Stefan at the Sherwood Plasma Fusion Theory Conference, presenting the research paper, co-authored with Nicholas Kroll, on magnetic mirror-controlled thermonuclear fusion. Nick is a classy American. If he had ever encountered David Niven, a classy-mannered American actor, I could bet my bottom dollar that Nick would have put him to shame. Weisskopf, says Stefan, introduced me to Ramsey in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in 1993. Vicky had just returned from Europe, having met with Archibald. Vicky was discussing the meeting with Ramsey. At that time I was preparing the book, honoring Vicky for his lifetime achievements. Ramsey had already submitted his contribution for the book. Roger Revelle, and V. Alexander Stefan in La Jolla, California, USA, late 1980s, early 1990s. On one occasion, says Stefan, Roger said to me, "You look very busy. I have an advice for you. Do only one thing at a time. And you will do more. The more I am burdened with projects, the better I work." But I did follow Roger's advice to not do them simultaneously, but in a sequence. Roger Revelle, the founding member of the University of California, San Diego, California, USA. V. Alexander Stefan, the founding member of the Stefan University, La Jolla, California, USA. I met Roger Revelle, says Stefan, in the late 1980s in La Jolla, California. I used to go to his office at the La Jolla Shoals area, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I would discuss with him many a topic on science and technology in higher education. Roger helped me in the establishment of the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University, 1989. In the 1990, says Stefan, I was planning the series of conferences on the environmental physics and technology. Slightly dropping down his jaw, Roger said to me, "That's good. But I am not a physicist." He accepted to be an honorary chairman. The conferences were held in 1992-93. Sadly, Roger Revelle had not been with us to see how much we appreciate his work for the advancement of the United States environmental science and technology. I dedicated the conferences and the conference books to him. Roger Revelle. Building a university from the roof down.
Anyone who knows Keith would realize that starting a new physics department in a non-existent university in a remote resort town where he would be surrounded by oceanographers was just the kind of far-out gamble that he would be completely unable to resist. The task would not as physically demanding as rock climbing, but in every other way it would be much more difficult. We had talked with Keith about our ideas of building from the roof down with a group of full professors who would bring most of their graduate students with them. For the first few years, we would have only graduate students until we had built up a sufficiently large faculty to handle undergraduates. Keith immediately started to think about what the new physics department should be like. Obviously, it should be a great physics department, probably the best in the country.
Before you have reached the end of the hallway, said Marshall to me, you will have found the solution. I was, says Stefan, on my way out of his office at the UCSD, Mare Hall, 1987. We had just finished the discussion on my invention, beat wave-driven free electron laser. I was happy to hear it. It meant that Rosenbluth, the Pope of plasma physics, as referred to by his colleagues, thought of me as the exceptionally smart physicist. Later on, I learned that Enrico Fermi, referred to as the Pope of physics, Rosenbluth's colleague friend, had used that line to cheer up his collaborators. Marshall N. Rosenbluth was the founding member of the Institute for Fusion Studies in Austin, Texas. He moved to La Jolla from Austin, Texas, in 1987, with Patrick H. Diamond, one of the most brilliant plasma physicists of my generation. Marshall Rosenbluth was the editor-in-chief for the book, New Ideas in Document Confinement, in my book series, Research Trends in Physics, published by the Institute of Physics Press, New York, 1994, as the proceedings of the conference, New Ideas in Document Confinement, held in La Jolla, California, 1992. Keith A. Bruckner and Marshall N. Rosenbluth, La Valencia Hotel, La Jolla, California, January, 1991. Both Rosenbluth and Bruckner, says Stefan, served as editors-in-chief for the books in my book series entitled Research Trends in Physics, published by the American Institute of Physics Press. In the spring, 2002, says Stefan, I met Marshall by chance in a street in La Jolla. He told me about the conference honoring him. That was the last time I saw him in person. At that time the world community of physicists was saddened by the deterioration of Marshall's health due to the cancer. Unfortunately, I did not attend the conference, as I was on a trip to Italy and Switzerland at the time of the conference. I talked, says Stefan, to Marshall over the telephone on August 7, 2003. I keep my daily journal. I asked him, Marshall, how are you feeling? Very badly, he answered. That was the last time I spoke to Marshall Rosenbluth, the Pope of plasma physics. In 2007, says Stefan, I organized a summer school on plasma physics, honoring Marshall Rosenbluth. Most of the closest collaborators of Rosenbluth's attended the school, sharing their memories about Rosenbluth, the physicist, teacher, colleague, and friend. Most of the closest collaborators of Rosenbluth's attended the school, sharing their memories about Rosenbluth, the physicist, teacher, colleague, and friend. Among the participants was Evgeny Pivalihov, a famous Russian physicist, the leader of the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER, and Roald Sagdaev, a famous Russian-American physicist, Rosenbluth's close colleague friend. Marshall Rosenbluth's ancestors moved to the United States from Odessa, Russia, at the turn of the 20th century. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Evgeny Pivalihov, one of Russia's top scientists, in Kremlin, Moscow, Russia. President Putin salutes Velikhov on the occasion of Velikhov's 80th birthday, February 2, 2015. Marshall Rosenbluth would have been 88 years old on February 5, 2015. Velikhov is currently, 2015, the chairman of the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER, Council, a huge international project, aiming to provide the world with an unlimited energy via nuclear fusion processes. I gave a talk, says Stefan, on Rosenbluth's paper, Parametric Instabilities in Inhomogeneous Media, 1972, and the research worldwide in the parametric plasma theory thereupon. In Russia they say, when the Tsar builds, there is a plenty of work for the Mason guilds. I see the Rosenbluth 1972 paper in that spirit. It is rich in ideas, it is of a deep scope, and error-free. In his 1958 science paper, Edward Teller says that many of his young collaborators made errors, but Rosenbluth's calculations were always error-free. The Rosenbluth paper initiated a number of research programs worldwide concerning the character of parametric instabilities, convective versus absolute, especially in connection with the controlled thermonuclear fusion research. Later on, Rosenbluth continued research in convective and absolute plasma parametric instabilities with Chu and Liu, among others. I know firsthand that the Rosenbluth paper was of a high concern for the laser fusion program at the Lebedev Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences led by Nikolai Basov in the early 1960s, Basov and Oleg Krohin, in Russia, then the Soviet Union, and John Dawson, in the United States, independently proposed lasers in interaction with the fusion pellets as a new thermonuclear fusion program. In the late 1960s, John Dawson was in the research visit to the Lebedev Institute of Physics of the Russian Academy of Sciences, in the Department of Plasma Phenomena Theory, led by Viktor Pavlovich Selin. I was in Moscow on and off from late 1977 to mid-1981, and was a participant in the research on that subject, in the Lebedev Institute, Moscow, Department of the Plasma Theory founded and led by Viktor Pavlovich Selin. Similar work on laser plasma interactions and tokamak-confined plasmas was done at the MIT Plasma Fusion Center led by Abraham Bears, who had extensively studied the problem earlier. For the Elmo bumpy torus and magnetic mirror plasmas, the convective absolute character of parametric instabilities was addressed at J-Core, Inc. San Diego and Kroll Associates, Inc. San Diego by Nicholas A. Kroll and V. Alexander Stefan. Rosenbluth and I, says Stefan, had been celebrating the same birthday, February 5th. And so had been Robert Hofstadter, whom I met in Moscow, Russia, in 1978. Now, on my birthdays, I never cease to remember to say, "Happy birthday, Marshall, happy birthday, Robert," in the high above. You, Marshall, do enjoy your knowledge on the solution of the controlled thermonuclear fusion problem. During his living years, the solution had been eluding him, and the rest of us, plasma physicists. It is still eluding us, the living plasma physicists. Now, however, Marshall knows it, yet he cannot tell us. Rule Tom rule, the plasma waves. I was a guest, says Stefan, of the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory in December 1982. My host was Thomas Howard Stix. I had met Tom in Verona, Italy, back in 1974, during the conference on toroidal thermonuclear fusion devices organized by Princeton University and the University of Milan. In Verona, Tom's wife, Hazel, would approach me and talked with me about Yugoslavia. After the conference, they were planning to visit Dubrovnik, Croatia, Yugoslavia. At the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, December 1982, says Stefan, I gave a talk on the parametric RF heating and current drive in tokamaks. The RF current drive had been initiated at the MIT in the mid-1970s by Abraham Bears, and, at that time, his graduate student Nathaniel Nat Fish. Nat had developed the theory, published in 1978, which was the hit in those days, and Nat, himself, was the star young plasma physicist. Nathaniel is one of the most brilliant plasma physicists of my generation. Abe received the United States patent for the invention. Tom and his wife, Hazel, organized a dinner party in my honor at their beautiful house. There were many physicists there from the laboratory at the dinner party. Nath Fish was sitting next to me, and Tom, across from us. I told Nat that it was possible to drive current in tokamaks by the use of lasers. As we were chatting at the dinner table, I told Tom about my meeting in 1978 with Nikolai Nikolaevich Bogolyubov from Dubna Joint Institute for Nuclear Physics in Russia, the Soviet Union. I explained that Bogolyubov in Russian means the one who loves God. Is he Jewish? Tom asked me. No, I replied. Melvin Gottlieb, Tom, and I had a lunch at the laboratory cafeteria. Gottlieb was very interested in the parametric, nonlinear heating and current drive in tokamaks. That was a new research topic at that time. Victor Frederick Weisskopf. The Stefan University movie series, History of Physics. Victor, Vicky, Frederick Weisskopf in La Jolla, California, 1992. An interview by the Alexander Stefan, June 17, 1992, La Jolla, California. Victor, Vicky, Frederick Weisskopf of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, visits, June 16 to 18, 1992, the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, IAPS, Stefan University. Victor Weisskopf had been the honorary science advisor of the IAPS, Stefan University, from 1989 henceforth. In La Valencia Hotel, where Vicky stayed, they would ask about him, who is that classy man? Human existence, says Weisskopf, is based on two pillars, compassion and knowledge. Compassion without knowledge is ineffective, knowledge without compassion is inhumane. Vicky tells us, says Stefan, about the compassion of the people of knowledge as having an open and loving heart, in general. I will tell about the compassion moment in physics, science, research, as I refer to it. It is the moment when you are aware that any further reasoning process on your topic is in vain. At that moment you open your heart compassionately and let it go. You go fishing or rock climbing, or to the movies to see the movie you are not interested in. This applies to any conundrum situation in life, when you simply must let it go, and let somebody else solve the problem for you, so to speak, in a blissful moment some sunny day. In physics research, that blissful moment is when all of a sudden the solution to the physics problem pops into your mind as the aha idea. Accordingly, after the compassion moment comes the blissful moment, if you are lucky enough. Physicist Einstein, Bohr, and many a great physicist consider themselves the lucky physicists. Murray Gell-Mann, whose PhD thesis advisor was Weisskopf at the MIT, says this. There are three phases in conceiving creative ideas. The first one characterized with hard work, days and nights. The second one, by awareness, that further conscious thought is useless, and the third one, sudden, while we are cycling, or shaving, or cooking when the aha insight pops in. Mystics, says Stefan, refer to the compassion moment as the indifferent love, a love not through a particular, but through the whole, which engages you know the whole. Recently, I have come across the YouTube movie with Murray Gell-Mann and Dalai Lama, among others, discussing the concept of compassion.
This search for forgiveness, compassion, is something that surely involves, at least occasionally, these parts of the human mind that are somewhat outside of conscious awareness. So there is possibly a relation between creative thinking in art and science and in other fields on the one hand, and the search for compassion, forgiveness, and so on the other.
Compassion open our mind, and then our mental state remain calm, and with that kind of mental state you can see the reality more clearly.
Victor Frederick Weisskopf, a Jewish-born American physicist, is considered one of the true luminaries of the 20th century physics. Vicky was a close colleague friend to a number of the luminary physicists of the 20th century: Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Max Born, Wolfgang Pauli, Werner Heisenberg, Paul Ehrenfest, Erwin Schrödinger, Lev Landau, and Richard Feynman, among others. Had you known Weisskopf personally, says Stefan, would you have felt that you were, as a physicist, closer, in some way, to all those luminaries of the 20th century physics, Vicky's colleagues, friends? Vicky played music with Einstein. Vicky on his piano and Einstein on his lina, as he referred to his violin. Vicky, a passionate pianist, also played chamber music at Niels Bohr's home. Here is what Vicky said to Sasha Stefan about Einstein and Bohr. Einstein. Nobel Prize in Physics, 1921. Niels Bohr. Nobel Prize in Physics, 1922.
Okay.
And Niels Bohr, as I often say, is my intellectual father. Not only in respect to physical insight and quantum mechanics, but in a way his approach to the problems, to not only physics but philosophy, and then his idea of complementarity, which in political respect is very important. I mean, that there are always many ways of looking at a problem that are apparently in contradiction, like art and science. Well, physics example, of course, is waves and properties. An electron is good, and although it's seemingly contradictory, and Bohr coined the word complementary for that. And also art and science, religion and science, and many other avenues of human experience that are necessary to get the full impact of life and thought. And this certainly was a great influence on me philosophically. And character. I always like to see different sides of subject. That is Niels Bohr. And apart from this, of course, he was so helpful. In 1936, when I had to leave church because I was 3 years in college, and we couldn't stay longer as a foreigner. And Nazism was prevailing, and he assembled, he found money for all these refugee Jewish refugee scientists, and then sent every year to England and America to find jobs for them. He found a job for me at Rochester, in the state of New York, and he helped so many people. And at the same time, he did very intensively interested in physics, especially at that time nuclear physics, compound nucleus, and all that. And so I have an unending admiration for this man. I think he's unique. Of course, one always compares him with Einstein, but Einstein is a completely different personality. Einstein is concentrated on the physics, whereas Bohr, the human qualities of Bohr are, in my mind, more outstanding than Einstein. Although Einstein is certainly, as a physicist, the greatest physicist who ever was. And I had, of course, I knew Einstein very well, personally, but I had not too much contact. It is hard to get contact with Einstein.
He was not communicative with people, or?
No, he has practically no students, and I played music.
Perfect. So his favorite was Bach, in a sense.
Yeah,
Bach and Mozart. And your favorite is?
I do not want to concentrate. The whole classical music spectrum. But he is not a great violinist. He's a better physicist.
But was Bohr in any sense musician?
Passively. I remember that I played in Bohr's house, chamber music, with the gentleman Koppermann, with the German physicist, Hans Koppermann. And he liked to have music in his house, but he did not himself.
Among the many breakthroughs that Vickers research has yielded, there have been the theory of the widths of energy levels of the electron, the clouded crystal ball model of nuclear structure, and the MIT bag model of hadronic matter. In 1932, Vicky was the member of the organizing team, working on the show, The Copenhagen Faust, as the tribute to the 100th anniversary of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's death. God, the Father, was Niels Bohr. Paul Ehrenfest was Faust. And Mephistopheles was played by Wolfgang Pauli. I was happy, says Stefan, to learn about the Copenhagen Faust. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus and Goethe's Faust have been fascinating me since my adolescent years. About the same time the idea had been born in my mind to create my own story about a physicist in search for absolute knowledge. The idea has been brought into fruition by publishing my 4 books, in the period from 2002 until 2007. It culminated in publishing of my Falstaff trilogy in 2011. Physics and Society, the book celebrating Weisskopf's life achievements. During Vicky's visit to the Institute for Advanced Physics Studies, Stefan University, in La Jolla, California, in 1992, the idea was conceived that the book be published by the American Institute of Physics Press, New York, celebrating Vicky's life achievements. The book was published under the title, Physics and Society, with 18 contributors, including 7 Nobel Prize winners in physics. The Stefan, editor, Physics and Society, essays in honor of Victor Frederick Weisskopf by the International Community of Physicists, American Institute of Physics Press and Springer, New York, 1998. The contributors in Physics and Society. Weisskopf's honors, awards, presidential positions, and memberships. Weisskopf is the recipient of a great number of honors and awards worldwide. He was president of the American Physical Society, 1960. President of American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and Director General, 1961 to 1965, of the European Centre for Nuclear Research, CERN. In 1976, Vicky was elected to the Pontifical Academy of Science, an advisory body to the Pope. He focused on the efforts for nuclear disarmament through the Pontifical Academy. Weisskopf's timetable. John Archibald Wheeler. By the Alexander Stefan. John Archibald Wheeler of Princeton University was Stefan's guest in La Jolla, California, in late January 1991, as the invited speaker for the conference entitled Achievements in Physics. John Archibald Wheeler, an American physicist, is one of the pioneers, with Niels Bohr and Enrico Fermi, in nuclear fission research. He participated in the development of the United States atomic bomb in Los Alamos, Project Manhattan, and, later on, he also participated in the development of the United States thermonuclear bomb, Project Matterhorn. Wheeler, says Stefan, told us about how Einstein had considered his gravitational constant to be the biggest blunder of his life. Later on, I directed the movie on John Wheeler. He inspired me to write the screenplay for the TV series, You Are the Genius. Here is what Wheeler says.
And on finding that out, Einstein said to George Gamow, so Gamow told me that cosmological term was the biggest blunder of my life, because, and I think we could give him the credit for the way things would have turned out if he hadn't introduced it, to predict correctly and predict against all expectation something so fantastic as the expansion of the universe is, to me, the most wonderful warrant that we all have for the idea that someday we'll understand the whole show.
Einstein inserts the cosmological term in his general theory of relativity, 1916, and forces the theory to predict that our universe is going from everlasting to everlasting, meaning there is no either the beginning nor the ending. In accordance to the wisdom of the day, the 1929 observations of Edwin Hubble, however, show that our universe is actually expanding, something like the inflating balloon. This means that our universe has the beginning, which is currently referred to as the Big Bang Genesis. Einstein abandons his constant and refers to it as the biggest blunder of his life. As of today, physics tells us that our universe is placed on the surface of the inflating balloon. No doubt, the Big Bang is the greatest show of the time world, the world of physics, and someday, as Wheeler puts it in this video, there is possibility that we will understand the full show. Wheeler argues that chaos is the primordial state of our universe, the Atlantis universe, as named in Stefan's Fosteff trilogy. Hesiod in his Theogony tells us that all started from the primordial chaos, the primordial darkness. Lucretius in his On the Nature of Things tells us about atoms that move harmoniously, but, now and then, can move chaotically, too. The world can go from a harmonious dynamics into a chaotic one of its own, free, nature, a remarkable thought. Gregorian in his The Mountain Wreath and the Light Ray of the Microcosm argues that chaos is the primordial state of the universe. Chaos and Gregorian's philosophy physics of nature. The eternal conflict order chaos is the focus of Gregorian's philosophy. In other words, he had been interested how chaos evolves into order. In Egypt of old, Seth is the ruler of chaos in eternal fight with Horus, the ruler of order. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it is Lucifer who brings chaos into the world. The conflict is symbolically depicted by an Ouroboros snake in many cultures. Order out of chaos is the teaching of Kabbalah and Sufi mysticism, whereby order is brought about by the Supreme Being. In other mystical teachings, such as is the Illuminati mysticism, order is brought about by man through revolutions.